perfect topic we're talking about today. Connie and I are, we've discussed having this regular weekly chat that we're going to do, kind of a lunchtime chat where we talk about basically energy and the things that try to pull our energy in a direction we don't want it to go, and how to work with that, how to overcome that. Last time we were talking about time management. And this time, very appropriately, we're talking about overwhelm. And it's a really good topic, actually, this week, because I've had several things trying to pull me into a state of overwhelm. And, you know, it's one thing to talk about it. It's another to actually be able to sort of implement something or do something that stops you from being taken over by these feelings of overwhelm. So how do you deal with overwhelm, Connie? Because you can never be away from it. I think nobody's sort of calm and peaceful and in a Zen state all the time. There's always seems like something's trying to pull us somewhere. How do you deal with it?
Yeah, and I don't think that's the goal of our life anyway.
No.
That we're always in this scene. At least not if we want to live in the real world. Like maybe a monk up in the Himalayan mountains can do that, but I think in the real world, this is not really the goal, to be always in this place.
Right.
I think our job here is more to know, or first off, to recognize we're in overwhelm, and then to have some tools available how to get out of it, or how to tame it. So to me, it's kind of like a little monster that starts to take over. And
that's a good visual.
Yeah, and so I feel like that's more my objective, that I kind of know, that I first of all recognize. And I feel like for the longest time, I had not the awareness that I am in overwhelm. and so I feel like that is already a good step when you're aware, okay, now I'm in overwhelm. And before you are in overwhelm, you're trying to find little tools and stuff that helps you get out of overwhelm, and that can be different for every person. So, but then know when you are in overwhelm to go to these tools and help yourself to get out of it. So that's kind of my take on the whole thing.
Yeah, I know, I completely agree with you, but I think very often people have this maybe a belief or an expectation, I'll say, that that shouldn't happen to them, or that, you know, they shouldn't get to a place of that. And I've noticed this particularly with people who are, let's say, on a journey of personal growth, and they've done a lot of personal growth work. There is a sense that, and I know there's a small part of me that does get irritated if I start to go off track, let's say, because there's a sense that, well, you shouldn't do that. You know better than that. You know what to do, so you shouldn't do that. So there can be guilt and, you know, all those kinds of things. But I think the key is just is awareness. And I think the key to everything is awareness.
And I don't think it's helpful. So like my coach always says that those are the unclean emotions. Like if we put this should part on top of our emotions, and it's not helpful. So it's more helpful to actually be aware and recognize what we're feeling without judging ourselves. And hey, I'm number one judge of my feelings, so I know all about that.
Aren't we? Aren't we all that are number one biggest critic and big, you know, the person who judges us the most?
Yeah. But so I like that how she says that this is not helpful whatsoever. The more you judge yourself, the less you get out of it. So by just recognizing and being aware that you are feeling, whether it's overwhelm or something else, and then trying to help yourself like you would help a friend instead of judging ourselves. I think this was very helpful for me. And like I said, I'm Mrs. Perfect, and I'm judging myself. Like even if I can extend grace and patience and everything to anybody else, to me, that's the hardest part. And I feel that is where our our job is. So, and to be aware that this should, and I should know better, and all this is not helpful, because we're not machines, we're just humans. And this is where we're growing, no? If we learn
right. And life happens, you know, and we can't control everything, and good luck trying. I think one of the things I've found that helps me the most, well, several things, but let's say the first step, when I start to become aware, like this week, I've had something where I'm trying to organize several events, and there's several people involved. And, you know, so I get in touch with this person, they get in touch with the other people, and then they come back to me. And we're trying to sort out dates and things. And there's so many people involved in those decisions. And just when you think you've got something agreed, and then somebody will come back and say, oh no, so-and-so can't do that. And you just get to that point where you want to go, you know. And so for me, one of the first steps I think I have to take is space, give myself space, distance myself from it. Because when you start to be aware that energy is rising, you know, it's starting to become something that's annoying, frustrating, and overwhelming, because it seems like no matter what you do, you can't resolve it. Staying in that state and trying to do something with it, you won't get anywhere except more frustrated. So I find that I have to step away from it, do something else. And then once I've given myself the space, then I'll do something like, I'll ask myself, okay, breathe first of all, and then how can I'll say, how can I make this easier for myself? How can I make this less stressful, something like that? And how can I do this in a positive way? Things like that, because to me that's reclaiming my power. Because when you start to go into a feeling of overwhelm, you are giving your power away to that situation, and you'll never resolve anything from that place. And so once you distance yourself, then you allow yourself to calm down a bit, and then you can say, okay, there's got to be an easier way to do this. I don't have to go there into this state of overwhelm. So how can I make it easier for myself? And that tends to work for me really, really well.
Yeah, I like how you say you distance yourself from it. I try to get the bigger picture. Like it's almost like I'm rising out of it and look at it from above. But another thing that I also do or try to do, it's not always easy, because when we're in overwhelm, it's sometimes the last thing you want to do is, but what I try, and you touched already on it with the breathing, and by breathing, coming actually to me. And like you said, taking the power back to me, because overwhelm oftentimes is and not always, but oftentimes is also, it's like indulgent. So we like a little bit sometimes to be overwhelmed, because then we can give away the responsibility. And when we start breathing and take the control back, we're in control again, but we also have the responsibility to actually find a way. So that's what I try to do. I try to raise and see the bigger picture. And by seeing the bigger picture, I may find an easier way how to do it, like you said, or I find a way to make it easier for me, but also coming back to me and actually saying, okay. And when you talked about your situation with all these people, I can totally see how this is overwhelming, and you feel like you have no control, because all these people are like little puppets, and everybody pulls on a different string, and every time you think you have them all in the center, somebody pulls away again. And so it's I think we all experience overwhelm. Like I said in the beginning, I don't think we can escape that. It's part of life. So the question is just, what are we doing with it, you know, in the end?
And I also want to touch on this, and that's, as a highly sensitive person myself, and I know you are too, it's something that highly sensitive people experience a lot and talk about a lot, this feeling of overwhelm. How do I get out of this? And that's because it's a lot more intense for someone who has the trait of high sensitivity, because we're bombarded with so much more. I think we also have perfectionist tendencies, like you said, as well. We want to get it right, you know, and so because of that, there's an added intensity to it. So it makes it seem for those who are highly sensitive that maybe they can go into that state of overwhelm more, or you know, more than most people, and that it may seem like it's harder to deal with because there's so much more input, you know, coming at you, which I think is true. I would certainly say it's true that we feel it more. There is a lot more of that going on. But I also want to add that these, you know, these techniques, these strategies that we're talking about really work, no matter whether you have the traits of high sensitivity or not. It just, you may have to do it more if you are a highly sensitive person. And, you know, for highly sensitive people, often, I think one of the things that gets in the way, apart from perfectionism, well, I think it goes hand in hand with the perfectionism, and that is what we talked about right at the beginning, is the expectation that, you know, because people with this trait seem to feel that they should be able to juggle all these balls in the air at the time, all the time, you know, and keep everything going, and not be pulled into a state of, well, frustration, anxiety, overwhelm. I think they have the expectation that that shouldn't happen to them. So I think managing your expectations is a big part of dealing with overwhelm too.
Yeah, and as you just said in the beginning, that voice that comes and says, "Oh, I should know better." I find this is the hard voice, especially if you are on your journey a little bit already and you have certain tools in place already and you are aware and you are on your journey, and then this voice comes in where you actually beat yourself up even more because you think like, okay, now I'm not a beginner anymore. I should know this better. So this is exactly what trips you up, and which actually, when you were talking, I just had this picture too. Is like, it's the heat is coming from the outside and the heat is coming from the inside. So you're sitting basically in fire. And it's not very comfortable. So I don't think also in situations like this that we're very making very good decisions or anything. So it doesn't help whatsoever. So that's why it's good when we're having the tools how to get out of it, and also remembering the self-love or self-care, and making sure we're not beating ourselves up, like I said, so that the heat from the inside is not almost burning hotter than whatever we feel like comes from the outside.
That's right. And, you know, self-care, as you said, is so important. And, you know, one of the things I've learned to do, which didn't come easily to me, but one of the things I've learned to do is to ask myself, especially if I've got a lot going on like that, I'll ask myself, what's the most loving thing I can do for myself right now? Because just even thinking in that way, then you're starting to practice self-care. And it's important to be kind to yourself. You know, I think we're often so hard on ourselves. And, you know, I'm again recovering from that and working on it, but there is that tendency to push and feel, you know, you should have everything under control. Life is not something that you control all the time. You know, you control what you can.
I think sometimes it helps to think about how would we react if it were a client of ours, or if it were a friend of ours. How would we react if that person is in overwhelmed state or all scattered and freaked out? How would we react? And then actually react that way towards us, which is also a practice. Or the other thing is, like, some people relate better to an inner child. So if you see the inner child, and maybe you actually really visualize that small little girl if you're a woman, and the small little boy if you're a man, or however you identify. You see that small, I don't know what age, you figure it out, what age comes to you. For me, she's probably about 5 or 6, and see how we would react to some small innocent child, you know, and then give us that. And I totally get it. That's hard because especially, I think, like you said, as highly sensitive person, we're so, or I feel at least, I'm so sometimes rigid with myself because I had to face the overwhelming world, or because all this stuff comes towards me. And until you realize that you are better off reacting with softness than with harshness to yourself, yeah, you may it's a learning process. And then it's still, the first notion might still be to be hard on yourself, and then just remembering to not. And you may have to have visual reminders for yourself, or however, whatever helps you to remember, no, wait a second, I wouldn't talk like this to a friend or to a client or to a little girl, you know.
Well, and again, this is where self-awareness is so important, because you know, to be aware of when that voice kicks in. And it's not to, I think it's important not to push it away or try to ignore it or anything like that, but to acknowledge it. You know, I'll often think, oh, okay, there it is. It's trying to, you know, make me feel bad, or it's trying to push me to do something else. And I just notice it, and I'll say, okay, you know, I notice it, and I'm going to choose to do this instead. And that, because otherwise I think it just gets more and more insistent, you know, and critical, more critical. And so I think it is important to acknowledge it, but it really takes awareness. And I think, you know, self-awareness is your absolute best friend, just paying attention to how you feel and what your thoughts are, and just being able, once you start to feel something that's not good, like anxiety, stress, overwhelm, whatever it is, that you just stop and you pause and you give yourself that distance, and then you can do something with it. Because I mean, really, when your brain's in that kind of state, you can't think clearly, and nothing seems to work, and you just go into a downward spiral. It just seems to get worse and worse and worse. So,
and I want to say to that too, is like in the beginning, I didn't notice it for a long time. So like I was beating myself up for a while until I actually clued off. And so when I say, okay, you have to become aware and then act differently, it could be that you beat yourself up already for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. And only then you realize, oh, wait a second, what am I doing? Now I'm doing exactly again what I don't want. And then be careful to not beat yourself up for beating yourself up. So then, so what I kind of want to get to is like, there is any time is a good time to go to softness and to self-care, and instead of beating up. So if you notice that again you beat yourself up instead of what you wanted to do, there's no reason to beat yourself up for it. But actually then whenever you notice, that's when you start doing the opposite and looking after yourself. And another thing that helped me was practicing being aware of where my emotional state is before I get into overwhelm. So maybe we all have cell phones now. We can set an alarm maybe once an hour or so and just check in. And the more I'm practicing checking in, it becomes a habit. And then I may catch it sooner and sooner too, when I'm in this frantic, like, so because I'm a perfectionist, for example, and because I want to do a good job and I do have a deadline, I may get into an overwhelm because of the time constraint or something. But if I'm used to checking in with myself, I may catch myself and I can take 2 or 3 deep breaths and center myself and take some of that overwhelm down, you know. And because I practiced before, when I'm not in overwhelm, to do stuff like that. So that might be the other thing.
Well, I think that's a really important point, because, you know, as we're talking about this, you might become aware that, you know, as you try to implement this, you might become aware that, oh my gosh, this happened today and I didn't do it. You know, I let this happen, and what I should have done is this. the important thing is that you're recognizing it now.
Yeah.
And then next time, like you said, you might catch it a little bit sooner. So it doesn't matter if you catch what happened after the event. It's important that you catch it at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Celebrate that you catch it at all.
Yes, exactly. Because that is the beginning of starting to change it. And the more you do that, the more you'll be able to notice it sooner and do something with it sooner. So, as we wrap this up, really, I guess the important thing is, well, two important things, I think, to recognize is one, that overwhelm will come. Like we said, unless you're living as a Zen monk on top of a mountain, life happens, and there will be times when you feel pulled in that direction of feeling overwhelmed. So that's the first thing, is to recognize that it's going to happen, at some point.
Normal.
And secondly, to recognize that you can do something about it. It doesn't mean that you have to let it take over. But as you start to gain an awareness of what's happening and pay attention more, then you can absolutely do something about it. And so it doesn't have to take you over. So I think those are the two main takeaways, really.
Yeah, very well said.
Yeah. Well, Connie and I are hoping to do this every week. We're still playing with the technology to find out what works best. And each 1 week Connie will host it, and the next week I'll host it. So we played with Zoom today, so we'll see how that works. But
and if you have any questions, you can put them down below, and we will address
questions, comments, and if there's something you'd like us to talk about. Our focus is energy, and just basically understanding that there's a lot you can do with your energy to help you live a happier and better life. So these are going to be our Friday lunchtime chats, because we love talking about it.
I could talk about it all day long.
Yes, me too. All right. Well, thank you, Connie. And
thank you, Linda.
All right. Okay. Bye then.
Bye.
Bye.